Cold open: if your monitoring platform, cloud migration tooling, or first-run admin setup is reachable from the wrong network, a critical CVE is not just another ticket. It is a trust problem. This is Daily Tech Hack Global for June 12, 2026. Today's briefing is a defensive analysis of recently published critical vulnerabilities affecting Splunk, Red Hat migration components, and Hermes Web UI. We will answer one practical question: what should defenders patch first, and what should they verify after the patch? The central thesis is simple. The most dangerous enterprise flaws are often the ones sitting inside tools that already touch sensitive parts of the business. Splunk is used to watch systems and security events. Migration tooling can see virtual machines, object storage links, vCenter credentials, and Kubernetes tokens. First-run setup workflows decide who becomes the administrator. When those layers fail, the blast radius is bigger than one application server. Let's start with the timeline. NVD published a group of critical Red Hat migration planner and assisted migration agent CVEs on June 10. Splunk's critical advisory for CVE 2026-20253 was also published through NVD on June 10. GitHub and NVD also list a critical Hermes Web UI issue, CVE 2026-49973, published June 11. These are different products, but they share a defensive pattern: access control, safe input handling, secure credential transport, and setup hardening all matter most when the tool handles privileged operational data. First, Splunk. CVE 2026-20253 is rated critical with a CVSS score of 9.8. According to NVD and Splunk Advisory SVD 2026-0603, affected Splunk enterprise versions below 10.2.4 and 10.0.7, plus affected Splunk Cloud Platform versions below 10.4.2604.3 and 10.2.25.10.14, allow an unauthenticated network-reachable user to create or truncate arbitrary files through a PostgreSQL sidecar service endpoint. The reason stated by NVD is missing authentication controls on that endpoint. Why should security teams care beyond the score? Because Splunk often sits inside the incident response nervous system. If a monitoring or logging platform can be manipulated, defenders may lose integrity, availability, or confidence in the evidence they depend on. The safe response is not to speculate about exploitation. It is to confirm versions, confirm reachability, follow the Splunk advisory, and check whether any file operations, ingestion gaps, service errors, or configuration changes occurred during the exposure window. Now to Red Hat Migration Planner. CVE 2026-53470 is critical at CVSS 9.6. NVD says an authenticated attacker could bypass an ownership check in an image URL endpoint and obtain pre-signed S3 URLs for OVA images belonging to other users. Those images may include long-lived agent JSON web tokens and source configurations. For defenders, this is not just a storage bug. It is a possible secret exposure path. If you run the affected service, review image export activity, object storage access, generated links, and unusual downloads. If evidence suggests images were accessed by the wrong user, rotate the tokens and credentials that may have been embedded in those images. The second migration planner issue is CVE 2026-53474, also critical at 9.6. NVD describes a spreadsheet processing SQL injection. A remote authenticated attacker could upload a crafted RVTools XLSX file, and SQL inside a spreadsheet cell may execute when cluster names are processed. The potential impact includes arbitrary file reading and exposure of Kubernetes service account tokens or other credentials. At a high level, the lesson is familiar: files that look like harmless assessment data can still become code or query input if parsing boundaries are weak. Defenders should restrict upload rights, apply the fix, review suspicious assessment files, and rotate platform secrets if token exposure is plausible. The third Red Hat item is CVE 2026-53476 in Assisted Migration Agent, critical at 9.6. NBD says an unauthenticated attacker on the same local area network can craft a gypped tarball that bypasses checks and writes arbitrary files to the system, potentially leading to unauthorized code execution on the appliance. The key phrase is same local area network. Internal reachability is still reachability. Migration appliances, temporary project networks, and lab-like VLANs can become soft targets when teams assume that internal equals safe. Segment the appliance, limit who can reach it, and treat unexpected archive handling or file writes as investigation triggers. CVE 2026-53475 adds a credential angle. NBD rates it critical at 9.3 and says Assisted Migration Agent hardcodes insecure TLS connections when communicating with vCenter. A man-in-the-middle attacker could intercept and harvest vCenter administrator credentials. That is a serious cloud and virtualization risk. vCenter admin credentials can unlock broad operational control, so the response should include updating the agent, checking network paths where interception could occur, reviewing vCenter login activity, and rotating credentials if the environment's exposure window or network evidence justifies it. The final story is Hermes Web UI CVE 2026-49973, critical at CVSS 9.4. NVD and GitHub describe improper access control inversions before 0.51.358. An unauthenticated remote attacker on a reachable network can hijack the initial setup by submitting a password setting parameter during the first run setup window, persist an arbitrary password hash, obtain a session cookie, and lock out the legitimate operator. The defensive takeaway is not unique to one project. First run setup is a privileged state. Keep new admin interfaces off untrusted networks, complete setup from a controlled path, upgrade affected versions, and avoid leaving fresh deployments exposed while automation is still provisioning them. Here is the payoff in the middle of the video. Patch priority should follow business leverage, not just vendor name. Ask 4 questions. Is the vulnerable component reachable from the internet or a broad internal network? Does it handle logs, secrets, source configurations, virtual machine images, administrator credentials, or setup authority? Would compromise damage your ability to detect or recover? And are there tokens or credentials that remain useful even after the software is patched? Splunk scores high on detection dependency. Red Hat migration tooling scores high on cloud data and credential exposure. Hermes Web UI scores high on initial administrator control. For security leaders, the recommended playbook is patch, reduce reachability, validate, and rotate when needed. Patching closes the known vulnerability. Reachability reduction makes the next bug less useful. Validation checks whether anything happened before the fix. Rotation deals with the uncomfortable truth that some secrets remain dangerous after the vulnerable endpoint is gone. If a pre-signed image URL exposed an OVA, if a spreadsheet flaw exposed service account tokens, or if insecure TLS could have leaked vCenter credentials, the patch is only the beginning. For cloud and platform teams, inventory is the hardest part. Migration tools are sometimes deployed for a project, used intensely, and then forgotten. Appliances may sit in internal network ranges that are not covered by normal production scanning. Developer and admin web interfaces may be reachable during initial setup because the deployment pipeline opens ports before controls are applied. Build a short-lived tool checklist: owner, network boundary, identity policy, secrets handled, log location, version, and retirement date. For incident responders, keep the review concrete. For Splunk, check service health, file integrity, endpoint reachability, admin changes, ingestion gaps, and unusual sidecar requests. For Red Hat Migration Planner, check who requested image URLs, which OVA links were created, whether downloads matched expected users, and whether any uploaded assessment files look unusual. For Assisted Migration Agent, check appliance file changes, archive processing logs, local network access, and vCenter authentication events. For Hermes Web UI, check whether first-run setup was completed by the expected operator, whether there are unexpected password changes, and whether the instance was ever reachable before setup was locked down. Where does AI security fit into today's story? Not every critical CVE is an AI vulnerability, and we should not force that label. But AI-assisted operations make trust-heavy tooling even more important. Organizations are increasingly using agents and automation to triage alerts, orchestrate migrations, create infrastructure, summarize logs, and operate admin panels. If those agents rely on compromised telemetry, exposed tokens, or hijacked setup workflows, automation can amplify a bad state quickly. The practical AI security lesson is to protect the tools and credentials that automated systems depend on. What should viewers watch next? Watch for vendor updates clarifying affected configurations, exploitability conditions, and detection guidance. Watch whether any of these CVEs enter CIS's known exploited catalog. The feed was not accessible from this run because the request returned HTTP 403, so no claim is made here about active exploitation. Also watch your own environment. Critical advisories become urgent only when they intersect with deployed versions, reachable networks, and valuable data. To close, today's answer is patch fast, but verify smart. Update affected Splunk versions and confirm monitoring integrity. Update Red Hat Migration Planner and Assisted Migration Agent, then review image access, uploaded files, appliance changes, TLS exposure, and credentials. Update Hermes Web UI before version 0.51.358 and keep first-run setup off exposed networks. No exploit code is needed to understand the risk. The core issue is trust. The tools that watch, migrate, authenticate, and initialize your environment deserve the fastest and most careful defensive response. Sources for this briefing are NVD, Splunk Advisory SVD 2026-20253, Red Hat CVE pages and related project references for CVE 2026, 53470, 53474, 53475, and 53476, plus GitHub Advisory GHSAP 52P4VMG4VQ3 for Hermes Web UI. Subscribe to Daily Tech Hack Global for concise, defensive AI and cybersecurity analysis every day.